All right, so we got a little taste there in the last one of using expressions, and you might already be like, well, Mr. Hurridge, why would I do it that way? That seemed like a lot of, I had to do all this extra work to do something that I could already do simply by, if I wanted to rotate, I could just do it here. Like, what's the point of that, of those expressions? And that's a fair statement. So I want to show you really the power of what you can do with expressions that you wouldn't be able to do without them, or is not as at least as easily. So what I want to do here is I'm going to set the rotation of the green square based off of the value of the rotation of the red square. So in other words, whatever this is, that's going to automatically affect my green one. So I could set those by hand, but obviously if I change one, it does not necessarily change the other. I'm going to select rotation on the green square layer. Let's do an option click to open this up. And it says transform.rotation. Now, instead of giving it an exact value, what I want to do is set its value equal to the value of the rotation of this layer. Okay. And so there's actually a really easy way to do this. Down here, you might see this thing that kind of looks like a little lasso or piece of string. And watch what happens when I drag it to the rotation property of this layer and let go. You can see, I don't want to get like too deep into what the code is doing, but essentially it's selecting this layer and it's grabbing that rotation value. So what does that really mean? Well, let's go, now that I've done this, I'm just going to close that up and I'm going to rotate the red square and notice that anytime I change the red square, the green square's automatically being affected. Maybe let's try it one more time. I'm going to set the opacity of my green square equal to the opacity of my red square. So once again, I'm going to option click here to open this up. And I'm going to use the pick whip and let's grab the opacity. I just, selected the layer and hit T to grab the opacity. And I'm going to click on this and drag it to opacity here. And once again, I don't want to get too deep into what the code's doing, but what this is doing is grabbing this layer and grabbing the value, whatever the current value of opacity is. So what that means is if I lower the opacity of the red square, I'm lowering the opacity of the green square and vice versa. All right. One thing I want you guys to kind of understand is that you can actually use the property value of one layer to affect an entirely different value of another. Okay. Or actually, I should say, let's see how this might work. Here in my blue square, you can see I have a bunch of keyframes. So my blue square is kind of scaling and animating over time. What I'm going to do is apply this automatically to this. So I'm going to set the scale of this equal to whatever the scale of my blue layer is. So I'm going to hit Option. And then once again, I'm going to set the scale of this equal to the scale of my blue layer. So if I use the pick whip and drag it, once again, I don't want to get too deep, but essentially what the code is saying is take this composition, take the layer blue square, and grab its scale value. That is going to be the value of what the scale of the purple or the violet layer is. So what's nice about this is you can see it automatically does whatever the other layer does. And this will always just kind of like, as long as it's related to scale, it's like, okay, if I make changes later on, you can see that the changes automatically update. So I change the animation here for this layer and it automatically updates on the other layer. What I'm going to do here is we're going to use the one value of a layer to affect another value of a layer by using expressions. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to set the opacity. Sorry, actually, I take that back. We're going to take this layer here. And I'm going to apply an effect. We're going to apply a Gaussian blur by going under Effects, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm going to set this to 0. Okay. And what I want to do is I'm going to take this effect and we're going to set the amount of blurriness equal to the amount of rotation in this layer. So let's open up rotation. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this a little bigger so it's a little easier to see here, is I'm going to option click and I'm going to set the blurriness equal to my rotation. So if I drag there, I can drag that. Now at the moment, the blurriness is 0 because the rotation is 0. But watch what happens as I rotate the scene. You can see it gets more and more blurred. And as I lower the rotation, it gets less and less blurred. Maybe I'm going to affect the opacity also based on rotation. So what I'm going to do is option click on opacity, and let's set opacity of this layer also equal to rotation. So with opacity, with an expression on it, I'm going to pick whip this and grab rotation. And it should be set to 0. Or sorry, it should be invisible. Why is it invisible? Because since this is set to 0, my opacity should be 0. And the more that I rotate, you can see it fades in. Because as I rotate, I'm increasing the number of opacity here. Okay. So in other words, I'm using one property with code to affect another one. Okay. So it also works with, with the effects, not just the transform properties. That's part of what I'm trying to show here. All right. I have two layers here. I have a purple layer and a yellow layer. And what I'm trying to do is, let me just double check. All right. I'm going to animate this square in terms of scale. I'm assuming you guys at this point hopefully know how to do that. So it's scaling. Okay. What we're going to do, I just want to see what property. Yeah, okay. We're going to use the values, the X and Y value of the scale to affect the position property of here. So I'm going to grab this. Let's hit position. I'm going to hit option. And if I use the pick whip and grab this to scale, what I'm doing is I'm saying, all right, well, the scale of this affects the position of this. So what does that really mean? Well, as I go further, this starts up here and then it moves down here. Why does that happen? Because it's starting at 100, 100. As the scale goes up, it's moving to position 200, 200. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm going to do something like this, where like maybe I'm going to set the opacity of this layer equal to the rotation of this layer. So let's just say for the sake of argument, while this is scaling, I'm also going to rotate it over 1 second from 0 to 100. All right. That's like a little more than a quarter turn, right? And I'm going to set the opacity of my yellow layer to the rotation of this layer. Click and drag. And so, you can use the value of one to affect another. So see how that's like fading in there? So, I mean, these are what I'm saying, where it's like you can really do some interesting things here where you would not be able to do this with just, I mean, having things update and change automatically, having things based off values of other values. You could do some very interesting kind of effects here, especially if you want to, program in some algorithms here and that kind of stuff by applying those here. Okay. So I want you guys to try that out. That was two, three, four, and five, please.